Max, question 2.
From God's perspective, is human free will predictable or predetermined?
Well, when you say human free will, it depends upon your definition, right? Remember, in the will principles, if I just go back to the will, remember we had free will, which is the gift God gave. Of course, from that God's perspective, that's predictable. It's his gift to us, so that's predictable. But if you're talking about human will itself, right, which is not human free will, it's just human will, then the question is that predictable? Well, will is this, isn't it?
But isn't it both?
Well, if you're saying it, you merged with desires...
Yeah, I'm talking about the whole...
Yeah. Now, the question you asked, though, is from God's perspective, is human will predictable? Now, from even the most developed spirit's perspective, human will is, if you consider it as the merging of will and desire, it is not predictable, even to the higher spirit. And the reason why is because desire is what causes unpredictability. Will is predictable. Given the person has this thing in that situation, they're going to act a certain way, right? Without a doubt. That's predictable. That part of it is predictable. But this is not so predictable, is it? You might one moment have a desire here and then bang, you've switched your desire and it's something completely different. Now you've become unpredictable, right? So from a spirit's analysis, you become unpredictable. But the difference for God is omnipotent, which means that God can mathematically calculate not only all of your will-based emotional conditions, but he can also calculate the potentials of all of your desire-based emotional conditions. So he's different than a human soul is in that regard. So from God's perspective, you're still predictable. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep. But from everybody else's perspective in the universe, as soon as you engage desire, you become unpredictable. Isn't that great? It's like, oh, that's unpredictable. Oh, look at what they did there. Isn't it fantastic? But imagine what life would be like if you could predict everything going on around you. It's like, ho hum. Everything would be just, another one there. I knew that was going to happen. Now, the reality is, though, when your development increases, you are able to predict more the way God predicts. So in other words, you can see the current condition and you can also see the desires that are going or are being exercised in the moment. And as a result of that, you can merge the two of those things and make calculations that allow you then to predict the course of events for that particular person. But it doesn't mean you're always going to be right, because desire is unpredictable. They might change it the next moment, and before you know, everything changes. And this is also why it's very, very hard to predict what would, aside from God's predictions, it's very, very hard for anybody to predict what may happen to the earth, for example, and what may happen to people on it. Because at the end of the day, you've got all these different people having all sorts of desires. Some are very negative and destructive, and some are positive, and so forth. And so it becomes very difficult to predict what 25 to 27 billion people are going to do. Does that make sense? You imagine the amount of calculations you need based on every single emotional belief and thought that the person may have, measuring that energy, calculating it all mathematically before you come up with the solution. Huge amounts of calculations that would be necessary to actually fully be able to predict. So the reality is we humans can only predict the future if we receive actual communication from God about that future, because it's only God who actually knows what the future holds. Make sense? Yeah.